Welcome, everybody, to a brand new episode of the Evil Safety Dudes. I am your host, Mr. Aaron Icino, the Director of Risk Management for IBC. And this is our podcast where we get to talk about anything and everything that has to do with risk. If it's a risk to you at home, if it's a risk to you at work, if it's a risk to your state, to your nation, to your people group, whatever the risk is, no matter how big, no matter how small, we're talking about it on this show. And this is episode 201. As always, everybody, please remember to like, rate, subscribe, share, and leave a positive review. And please check out our brand new YouTube channel. It's the Aaron Icino Show. And that's where these podcasts will be on. So you can see us. They're still going to be everywhere where you listen to podcasts, audio only. But if you want to see my crooked nose and my bald head, come on over to YouTube and make sure you hit the subscribe button. All right. Well, as always, I like to keep the intro short to bring in our guest because we got a super exciting one. I've been excited about this one for a long time. Jonathan Feldstein, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm great, Aaron. Thank you. It's nice to be with you.
And you live in Israel, is that right?
I do.
But you're not in Israel right now.
You're catching me outside of Dallas, Texas at the moment. Yeah,
Nice, nice.
I've been here in the States for I think over 3 weeks already on the book media and book launch tour for our new book from the Genesis 1, 2, 3 Foundation.
Well, that's really awesome. So you're here in America, you got a book launch. I definitely want to talk about that book, Israel the Miracle. But first off, let's get the audience to get to know you. So you are the president, actually the founder of the Genesis 1, 2, 3 Foundation. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. We
Awesome.
started we started the Genesis 1, 2, 3 Foundation back in 2017 when
Wow.
after a career of a few decades working in nonprofit and building bridges between Jews and Christians, I decided that at that point, after 50, I wanted to do something more meaningful when I grew up and also wasn't strictly objectifying Christians as a faith-based ATM, simply
Okay.
trying to get money out, but actually building deep relationships.
That's awesome. And you made Aliyah to Israel in 2004.
Correct. This summer's
I
20
saw that.
years.
I saw that everywhere I looked you up, but I was trying to find where you made Aliyah from, and from your accent, I'm guessing it was American.
I made Aliyah from the U.S. I was born and raised in the U.S. I went to college here. I went to Emory in Atlanta. I moved back up north in the early 90s in order to meet my wife and get our family started. And then, right now, March of 2004, I went on what's called a
Uh,
pilot trip,
okay.
and a pilot trip to look for work to see if I could find work so I would be able to afford to live in Israel with my wife and then at the time 5 kids, and found that there was an abundance of opportunity for me. And so went home a week later, gave notice to my job. That was April, and on August 3rd, we were on an airplane. We put our entire
Wow.
house in a 40-foot shipping container and made the
Wow.
move.
Wow. That's pretty cool. I'm jealous. I honestly, as a Christian American, I just have this deep desire for Israel. It's kind of hard to explain. It's cool when I meet people that feel that way. Um, but I mean, raised in a secular home, dad was a Buddhist, mom was a hippie. I mean,
Wow.
there was no religion to speak of. Um, but finding God way back in 2002 and my Jewish Christian relationship, just really kind of happening the last few years. It's just this desire for Israel and to be there is so strong. I went last year. I just had to go. I didn't have the money. I just like took out a loan and went. And my friend Rabbi Pesach Walicki, he hooked me up with a guide, a friend that he knew that was licensed, Yaakov Aram. And so he just took me all around Israel, just like one on one. He was like my Torah teacher. It was just like amazing. And now it's time to take the family back. And so we're saving up for that because I have 3 kids as well. So
Good.
trip for 5 to go over there is not cheap.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
So man, I just it's cool. It's cool to hear stories, Aliyah. And so you found work, you're over there, you put everything in a shipping container. So I was wondering, like, if I did that, how would I do that? I was just actually thinking about that this morning. How would I get my couch? Is that like a pretty common thing of folks who make Aliyah? Is that the way to go, the shipping container?
Yeah, look, if you're established, I was already almost 40 years old when we moved. So, established, we were living in our second home, furnished, I don't remember, 5 bedroom house, something like that. And we had a lot of stuff, um, furniture, books, which we had to leave behind. Gosh, I don't even remember, but it was probably mostly furniture, clothes, toys for the
Right.
kids. My kids were between the ages of 3 and 11, so we brought a lot of toys and we wanted to bring as much as of our own comforts so that they would be comfortable, so that right away, even though we were moving into a rental home with no knowledge of where we were going to be long term, that we owned the stuff and it didn't make sense to sell it for pennies on the dollar or give it away.
Right.
So you throw it into a shipping container a couple of weeks before you leave, and then it meets up with you a couple of weeks after you arrive.
Wow. Well, that's cool. All right, not what I planned to talk about today, but the logistics of moving to Israel is interesting to me.
Complicated.
Yeah, my wife, I don't know how she feels about me talking about this, but when I was there, I'm like, all right, if I did live in Israel, where would I live? Which city? And like obviously, like first it's like Jerusalem, of course. Um, but my friends were in Bet Shemesh, and I really like that community. I know how they feel about a Christian over there, but it was awesome. I was like, I could do this. I could totally live here.
Well,
So,
so we'll,
what?
let's first talk about getting your kids, you and your family over and
Yeah,
making that happen.
where are you at in Israel?
We're in Efrat, which is in the Judean
Okay,
mountains, just a drop south of Jerusalem.
okay. I just interviewed um, Eleazar Michel from
Ah,
Israel 365, and
sure.
he lives in Efrat.
Yes, we're
Yeah,
neighbors.
yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, small country, right?
Indeed.
Okay, so let's dive into some deep stuff. So tell me about Genesis 123 Foundation. You hinted to a little bit, but what's the mission of this organization, this
Yeah,
nonprofit?
so thank you. So our mission, Aaron, is to build bridges between Jews and Christians with Israel in ways that are new, unique, and meaningful. When I say that, what I mean is we're not, as I said earlier, we're not trying to objectify Christians as a faith-based ATM where you slip in a card, punch in a four-digit number, take out your cash, and don't even say thank you. And sadly, too many people, Jews and Christians, interact with Christians that way, and really it's an objectification. It's transactional. And for me, building deep relationships is important. So just as an illustration, you're catching me in Texas. These the weekends that I'm here as bookends, I do Shabbat in hotels or in Christian friends' homes where
Nice.
they invite guests, and I host Shabbat as if it's in my home, and I will prepare meals, and I love to do that. But it's really meant to be something that we're building deep relationships
Right.
like that. We started out in 2018 with the Run for Zion program, which is the first Christian program around the Jerusalem Marathon. Again, with the note that if you're a runner, even just a modest runner, 5 or 10K a few times a week, Jerusalem is the most significant place to that you'll run. That's not Boston or New York or London or
Right.
Athens or Tokyo that are famous marathons. Jerusalem is the most significant. So we built up a whole Christian program, but because the name Genesis 123 is derived from the verse Genesis 12:3, we also built in a subsidy program so that people can come, if not for free, almost for free, based on how much money they raise, but not requiring anyone to raise a penny because we don't want to make that a barrier. Um, I do I love how you're doing your podcast because I'm the host of the Inspiration from Zion podcast.
Yes.
I have just recorded episode 138, I think it was, and I have the distinction of being the only Orthodox Jew with a weekly podcast on and from Israel on the Charisma Podcast Network. So there's
Oh,
300
nice.
plus evangelical podcast hosts and Jonathan. And I
Not,
love that. And I love doing that. The book will talk about, but really just different ways to engage, to make relationships, and find ways not to repeat what other people are doing, but new mechanisms.
So I want to back up because there's some that have no idea why me are in Christian Jewish relationships. Not that like why would they work together, but why do people need to bring them together? Because they don't understand the history.
Correct.
A lot. I mean, history is lost. People don't know history. They don't know facts anymore. Facts have become bad. It's all about feelings anymore. So why why do we even need to have people like you and I in Jewish Christian relationships, bringing the two faith groups together?
You know, it's an excellent question. There are so many Christians who I encounter who don't know that there's a really horrible history from the first century, from the beginning of what's quote unquote the church. The earliest Christians were Jews, and immediately once Constantine made Christianity the state religion in Rome and pulled everything that's Jewish out of it, uh, we saw some really bad things happen, minimally with replacement theology, certainly anti-Semitism, and that unfortunately was the beginning of a really bad history. Now, most Christians don't know that because
Right?
because if you don't grow up in a church, even if you do, that's not something that you study or talk about. But most Jews do know about that, at least anecdotally, because look, we're about to celebrate a holiday reenacting our liberation from slavery in Egypt uh, 3,500 years ago, right? So if we're going back and celebrating a holiday from there, we surely know about things that happened 1,000 and 2,000 and 500 years ago, and even in modern times. And I think it's so important in general. It was important before October 7th. I think it's even more important today because never before in history, and I don't mean the history of the state of Israel, never before since the first church have we seen the level of support for Israel and the Jewish people from Christians, period. And that's significant. And I believe part of that is because never before have we seen such black and white, good versus evil, with
Right.
us, Jews and Christians, worshiping the creator of the universe, the only people, and everyone else. Not that everyone else is our enemy, but everyone else doesn't. Some of them may worship a God, but he's not the God, or that's not the God.
Right.
And it's so important. And so the other thing is, I'm glad you asked this question. To digress just a drop more, when I talk about building bridges, for me, I take on the personal responsibility that it's not just a one-way direction with Christians to come and get closer to us, but I want Jews to understand why Christians love and support Israel, that it's significant, that yeah, people come with their own baggage and with their own ideology and theological things that we don't agree with, but generally it's an unconditional love, and we must stand together, Jews and Christians, because again, we're the only people who worship the Creator, but we're also hated by the same people. We've got to be together.
Right.
Now's the time.
Definitely. So, what are some of the obstacles you come across on the Jewish side, trying to convince them that, hey, there's a couple Christians that are cool, that aren't out to convert you, that aren't out to get you, because there's 2,000 years of history where Christians were very terrible to the Jewish people,
Yeah.
and like you said, that is yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
Judaism, in a lot of ways, is a religion of remembering, and a lot of the holidays are to remember, and so they remember.
We
So
remember.
how do you overcome that obstacle? Because I imagine that's a pretty tall order.
We carry a lot of baggage. And I ask my Christian friends just to have grace to understand, and because many Christians don't know that that's the
Oh,
history. But I say in quotes, friends, people who are no longer my friends, people who don't like religiously that I connect with Christians, that I am an Orthodox Jew and I speak in churches, that I even speak about Jesus and who he was to Christians and to Jews and the differences. Somebody recently didn't like an article I wrote and asked me to never send them an email again. So
wow.
I come across this, and then I come across Jewish friends, people who are sincere and will say, well, don't they support us only because of end time something? That's not usually language that Jews use, but that's the intention, or that they want to convert us all, or that this, or that. And I have very open, candid conversations where I tell Jewish friends, sure, there are people who believe that, but that's not why they're supporting. They're supporting Israel because Israel's significant to God, and therefore Israel's significant to them, and it should be. And I'll just give you an illustration. I mentioned Shabbat when I'm traveling. I love it. I actually wrote an article for a Swedish newspaper recently, Christian newspaper, about how I do Shabbat when I travel. But when I'm at home and I find groups that are coming to Israel and planning Friday nights in their hotel in Jerusalem, wherever I can, I say, no, 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 no. You can't just have a buffet dinner and not have a Shabbat experience. So sometimes my wife and I will go to Jerusalem and be in the hotel with the group and host them and give them a Shabbat experience there. And other times where we can, we bring groups to our community, and not all coming to have dinner at my house because I don't want it to be unruly, but I have friends, Jewish friends, who will host two, three, four, six others. And for both my Christian friends and my Jewish friends, everyone tells me that that's a highlight because it allows a sincere opportunity for conversation. That's what I'm about. I want to dig down, break down stereotypes, and the opposite, of course, of breaking down stereotypes or barriers is the bridge building that I speak about.
So one of those issues that you mentioned, and I've heard it many times before, and I'm trying to wrap my head around it, was a hesitation on the side of the Jews with the Christian relationship because of end times. They only support us because of it fits into their end times
Right.
theology. I'm trying to figure that one out. Like, have you got any details on that one?
Well, there are Christians who believe still that when all the Jews come back, that will bring the ultimate battle, Armageddon, and therefore we all need to be there for that horrific battle, and that will bring Jesus back. I mean, that's a simplistic way of explaining it, but
Okay.
there are Christians who believe that, certainly who have believed it. I think maybe it's less prominent now. But Jews believe that that's why Christians support us, or one of the main reasons that Christians support us, simply to get us back in order to hasten Jesus' return. And I tell my
Okay.
Jewish friends, first of all, that's not true. Second of all, if you don't believe in Jesus as Messiah anyway, then what does it matter what our Christian friends believe? Because we have our own interpretation and understanding of Scripture, and Israel's where we belong. So why are
Right.
you resisting the people
Yeah.
who are supporting bringing us to where we belong? It doesn't make any sense.
Right. Yeah. In the Christian circles that I run in that are very pro-Israel, none of them that I know of, like, we got to do what we can to regather Jews so we could have the battle Armageddon. I mean, I just, yeah. I mean,
You
I
mean
mean,
that's not in your weekly meetings? They don't put that as agenda
no,
item number
no,
three?
no. Like, let's find a Jew and send them to Israel so we could have this terrible battle. I've never like heard anybody uh, go there. But in the Christian scriptures, it talks about that as well as the Antichrist is a big figure, in Christian end times theology, and there's scripture where, in the third temple, he's going to be there and then he's going to be destroyed. So I mean, there's that aspect of the building of the third temple and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but I want to talk about the other side of the coin since you work with Jews and Christians. So, what obstacles have you come across on the Christian side for bringing Jews and Christians together?
It's a good question. I think because I'm as open as I am, and I never ever want to be offensive, not to Jews or to Christians, or to that, or nor do I try in most cases for anybody. But certainly, if you're having a deep theological conversation about the significant things that we differ on as Jews and
Okay.
Christians, that's going to challenge the theology of many Christians. And I'm not looking to change anyone's theology. I'm just looking to create understanding and know, and for Christians to know what our history is, where we're coming from, my perspective that I was born 59 years ago into a 4,000-year-old covenant that God established with Abraham, and and here I am as an inheritor of that, and that covenant hasn't been broken. And we as Jews are a small number of people in the world, very small number. And our covenant with God is unique. For Gentiles and Christians specifically, it's different.
Right.
And one doesn't preclude the other. God has to give everyone a path to get to him. And if you're an individual who's never discussed or considered that, or a pastor who didn't learn it in in theology classes, it's going to be challenging. And that my intent is not to challenge anyone to upend their thoughts, but just to really say, okay, here we are. It's 2024. We're 2,000 years almost since Jesus was crucified. We've seen unprecedented support for Israel and the Jewish people in the last 6 months alone, plus 75 years prior to that. How can we build upon that? And so some people are uneasy theologically. Even I'll tell you what, even promoting my book, there was someone who was trying to set me up with some media, and they told me they wouldn't have a Jew come to talk about the book on their radio program, which I thought was okay. That's sad, because if you look at the book, it's not my book. It's a book of 75 essays by Christian leaders around the world. God just gave me the download of the idea and to make it happen. But so there are people who have theological issues. There is latent anti-Semitism that I deal with, but not anti-Semitism I want to burn you and shoot you or line you up in your communities and behead you, as happened October 7th, but just anti-Semitic tropes. And we all need to be bigger than that. We need to come together and have serious conversations.
For sure. And I think that's something Christians could work on. One of the things, one of the many things I love about my Jewish brothers and sisters is, they're not easily offended, like they like to talk about like deep stuff, like my friend Pesach who says, you can't offend, like, let's go, let's talk. We like to talk, we like to argue, we like to debate, and we're not going to get emotional. We're gonna be able to have a theological conversation, and it's stimulating for us. It's fun. And Christians on the other side, I think they get real emotional when somebody has a different view, and not all of them, of course, but some just can't have those conversations with someone who has a different opinion. I think that's reflected in society as a whole these days, and it's something we really need to get better at, is being able to have adult conversations with people who
Right.
don't agree with you.
And how uplifting that we can do that from
Yeah.
either opposite sides of the same coin, or the same side of the coin. Also revering our creator. But just I always say when I host webinars, sometimes I always podcasts, but sometimes webinars, that we need to approach each other with mutual respect, but from our respective traditions. And
Right.
Jews don't understand Christians, and Christians don't understand Jews. So what do they say? That's why God has given us 2 ears and one mouth. We need to listen
Right.
double the amount that we speak.
I thank God that a lot of Christians are finally starting to get it. I myself, in our church, I'm pastor of a church, and so on our Wednesday night service, it's Torah, and pretty soon to be the Tanakh. We're not on the portions, because it's just too much. Like we're Christians, so like we don't know this stuff. Like it's not like detailed to us. Our pastors weren't Torah scholars. There are some that are, but so we don't do the portion just because it's a big passage to cover every week, like in a service. So we do a chapter. We do a chapter every Wednesday night. We start Genesis 101. We're in like Leviticus 13 right now, and we're just marching all through the Torah. And when we get through that, we'll be in the
Amazing.
Tanakh. And then once we get all through the Tanakh, then we'll start over. So it's not exactly how you guys are doing it, but we're learning it. And I'm a Christian pastor, so I'm ignorant on this stuff. So I've turned to rabbis. So I follow a lot of rabbis online, and I'm learning from them, and I'm getting the insights and the depths and the meanings that I couldn't get from Christian commentators. And a lot of other Christians are doing this, like, hey, if we want to understand all 66 books of this Bible, the Christians have 66, we need to go to our older brothers who these passages were given to, and we need to learn from them. So there's a lot that are doing that. And I think that's cool. But one movement I would like to see, and this is
Yeah.
going to take a very secure, you know, person to do this, a Jewish person to do this. What I would like to see, and I may be asking too much, but because, like you said, all the apostles and Jesus himself were Jews, and everything they taught was just laden with Torah and Tanakh, and the expressions they use. This sounds weird, but I would actually like a a Jewish person to help teach us Christians the Christian scriptures. That sounds wild. It would take a secure
No.
person, but like I want to run this scripture past a Jewish person because they're going to know more of the insights. And that's not happening that I know about, but it's
Not so
something that I would
much.
desire because I mean, I honestly think a Jewish person wouldn't be offended by most of the apostolic writings.
I think well, Jews get offended on a lot of stuff, so I'm not going to say most will or won't, but I think the idea I was kind of anticipating that you might be going that direction, and maybe that's a conversation we should have offline because just yesterday I was having a conversation here in Texas with a friend who's a pastor, and years ago I was invited to be part of a. First of all, I don't know much about the New Testament, but I when I go to a church and I hear a pastor preaching from the New Testament more often than not, I'm hearing Old Testament Tanakh verses. And why? Of course, it
100%.
makes sense. They were all first century Jews. Their scripture was Tanakh. Their scripture was my
Right.
scripture. And so their commentary was based on their society and sociology and theology. And that was all that of a first century Jew. And I think it would be fabulous to unpack the New Testament, both in terms of that sociology and theology and I don't know, pick any verse, but odds are that's going to revert back to stuff that we study as Jews all the time and should be unpacked. And I think that that would be quite enlightening and important both for Jews and for Christians. The one challenge is the New Testament was not originally written in Hebrew because you get
Right.
um, so much depth from Hebrew language because, matter of fact, when I was in college, there was one Christian student who was also in my Hebrew class, and I didn't understand why. It made no sense. He said, well, his name was Tim. And I said, Tim, why are you doing this? He said, well, my father's a pastor and I want to understand the Bible in its original language. And I was young. It was before God called me to be a bridge between Jews and Christians. I thought he was a little weird, but cute. Okay, nice idea. But the truth of the matter is, if you look at the Hebrew, and if you look, therefore, at if the Apostle John is referring to something that goes back to Genesis or Deuteronomy or Leviticus, it doesn't matter. Then you look at the Hebrew in its original, and because he knew the Hebrew, he knew the nuance, and these are so important for Christians to understand. And it's the flip side of that, of course, is that those Christians and pastors out there who say, no, we don't need the Old Testament. That's like building a house with no foundation.
Yeah, it's ludicrous. It's something that I fight all the time. There's actually New Testaments that are Psalms, Proverbs, and then the New Testament books. And that's some people's Bible. And I'm like, this is insane.
Yep.
This doesn't make like you don't understand pretty much anything. But I wish I could say Christians were all like, Bible scholars, but it's just they just believe what's preached and that's their
True.
knowledge and
Okay.
they're not going to the source. And it's unfortunate. The Jews have a huge leg up on us with the Torah portions, going over these Torah portions year after year. They really got a super deep understanding of the Torah, and that's so awesome. I think most Christians today are biblically illiterate, and it's something I fight as a pastor.
I won't disagree with you, but as the Jew in the room, I'll just say your words, not mine.
Yeah, it's something I battle all the time. People, I have an article I wrote. I haven't done anything with it, but it's like Christians don't believe Christ anymore, and so I have outlined everything he taught. Certain things that he taught that they do the opposite of in mainstream Christianity. They don't believe Christ anymore. And I'm not going to go into that here. It's a whole other podcast, but it's just we call ourselves Christians, Christ-like, but yet
Good.
we're not following his teachings as a whole. We're following these denominational doctrines. these different
Right.
denominational, everybody that founded a denomination kind of spun off the Bible and made their own thing, and we're following those men and not necessarily, the book itself. But I
Sure.
understand Judaism is similar because there's all these different denominations or sects, if you will, and there's different theologies, and so I think they're kind of similar in that way that both faiths have a lot of different branches.
There's a lot of room for interpretation, and some
Right,
of it, like in Christianity, some of it is silly, but based on my
right,
view. And I'm not judging anybody. I'm just saying
right.
it's not grounded in something that's biblical. It is from a Jewish perspective, Jewish values, but doesn't mean following Jewish law, or living the life of an observant Jew. And I think that as somebody who didn't grow up as an Orthodox Jew, I think that that's sad. I just think that there's so much richness. Um, it's just sad if people don't understand that. And I think the corollary of that is what you're doing and advocating for, which is helping Christians to understand a deeper connection to their own
For sure.
Christianity through a Jewish
Yeah.
prism.
It's a big movement right now, understanding the Jewish roots of our Christianity. It's a
Yeah.
big movement, and I'm proud to be a part of it. And it's like duh, it's like logical to me. It's a lot of people are saying it, and I believe it. If
Yes.
we understand the Torah and the Tanakh, we could understand the Christian scriptures more.
True.
But that's lost on some people,
Right.
and so that's. There's battles, but let's talk about all the cool stuff, all
Yeah.
the good. You mentioned earlier the people who want to kill Jews want to kill Christians.
Yep.
So we have common enemy, 100%. I was in Pakistan preaching all over the whole country when Osama bin Laden was hiding there in 2004, the year you made Aliyah. I was in Pakistan, and Osama bin Laden was hiding in Islamabad, and he had a fatwa out on the head of any American, $1 million. And I call it dumb enough or faithful enough. Um, I was there and preaching, and I was 24. I was young and dumb. I was just full of faith. And I remember being in a town square one time. Pakistan's 97% Muslim, and I remember I was preaching Deuteronomy 6 and 4, the Shema. Hear,
Yes.
O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. So I'm in this town square and I'm just full of faith and I'm just preaching, and as soon as I said Israel, because most of these folks couldn't understand me because I'm speaking English. I did have an interpreter, but they mostly spoke Punjabi, or Urdu, but everybody knew the word Israel.
Wow.
And when I said Israel, it's like that whole town square stopped and I just got
Wow.
all these dead, evil stares. And I was like, whoa, I said something weird, but I was too dumb, ignorant to really understand what I did. But they tried to kill me a few times while I was over there preaching. I was invited there. I was just going around with the groups that invited me, but we had to have armed guards to protect me because they wanted to kill me. I was in New York, December, right after the towers came down. I
Oh,
smelled the burning bodies. I was on the site. Um, I know the evils of jihad, and it's just I can't believe there's Christians and Americans that are pro Hamas. I can't believe a lot of these kids who weren't alive when the twin towers came down. They have no idea, and it really is a backwards, upside down world. But one of the messages that I'm trying to get them to go is these people will kill you too.
that's correct.
You know?
And by the way, you mentioned Pakistan. I don't want to overplay it, but a number of Christian friends in Pakistan who love me, who love Israel, and you know this, they're persecuted tremendously,
Yes.
and physically abused, sociologically,
Right.
second class, third class,
Yes.
killed. I actually posted a video on YouTube a couple of years back of a Christian man in Pakistan being lynched. YouTube
Yeah.
didn't like that, said it was too violent, and they took it down and gave me a slap on the wrist. And I said, I'm not promoting it, I'm calling it
Yeah.
out, and we need
Yeah.
to care about that. But
Yeah.
but Christians are persecuted everywhere Islam enters, whether it's in Iran or Pakistan, Syria and Iraq with ISIS, Lebanon today. where Christians are persecuted. Look, even in the Palestinian Authority, where Bethlehem is a city that's my neighbor.
Right.
Bethlehem used to be 80% Christian. It's now 10 to 20% Christian. It has nothing to do with Israel. It's because Islam is intolerant of Christianity and Muslims are unsafe. And I have Christian friends who are Israeli Arabs who are also unsafe. And as an Israeli Jew, that incenses me. There's no way we can allow that lawlessness in Israel. But I have a big heart for protecting Christians throughout the world in the Middle East. And any Christian who doesn't see it, I
Right.
pray that they will, because God forbid it should come to them.
Well, one of the issues is our media. We're not getting the truth in mainstream media. It's bought and paid for, and there's narratives. Like if you walk around to any Christian in a big church today and ask them about the Christmas Day massacre of Christians in Nigeria that just happened, they're like, "What? I'm not hearing anything on that."
Correct.
There's complete genocide,
Correct.
going to Nigeria right now.
Correct.
And it's the same folks that would kill a Jewish person if they're standing right
Correct.
next to the Christians.
Correct.
So, Christians that are not supporting Israel, that are not getting it, that are pro Hamas, I don't understand it. So it's something that I'm fighting for. It's why we're doing these podcasts. It's why I'm preaching is to try to get truth out. But as far as Jewish Christian relations, the people that want to kill me want to kill you. And then
Correct.
the other awesome thing about it that you said earlier is we believe in the same God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you know? And to me, a lot of people argue with this. We're the only two faith groups that do that. Some will argue that Islam is an Abrahamic faith, and I'm no Quran expert, but from what I understand, what they record about Abraham is completely different than what's in the Torah.
I don't know that Islam is an Abrahamic faith. Arabs come out of Esau. Okay, we can say that, but Islam hasn't. It only came on the scene 1,500 years ago,
Right?
right?
Six
So,
hundred.
look, I'm not an expert either. I studied comparative religions. Islam, to me, Muhammad was a great marketer. He took a little bit of
Can you
Christianity.
call him a colonist?
A colonist. He was a military victor. He conquered lands, and then he took ideas from Judaism and ideas from Christianity that were central in in the Middle East at that time, and like put them in a jar and shook them up and said, "Okay, I'm the
Yeah,
prophet, and these are interesting ideas, and we subscribe to them, but Islam is the only true way." And Islam and this there's yes, Christians have done things in the name of God against Jews, against others that have been horrible, but Islam actually says it is either convert or die by the sword.
right.
And now they have bigger things than swords to use against us. So I don't know. I don't see any correlation in the being of Allah that they call God to the identity of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Right.
Don't see it.
So, as far as the good news, Jews and Christians believe the same God. Not that it's good news, but we have the same enemy. So I think we have more in common than we have
Agreed.
apart. And the scripture commonality is so awesome. And I just love hearing the rabbis teach about the Torah. And we got a lot of good stuff going. So how is Genesis 1, 2, 3 kind of bringing that back? Because you had some really awesome words. We want to do this in a meaningful way, in a new
Yeah.
way. But what are some of those specifics that are bridging that?
So I mentioned Run for Zion. That was our first big initiative. Of course, we
Awesome.
launched it in 18, and our first pilot group was a small group in 2019. Right now, March, the beginning of March, and that was great. It was a proof of concept. We had 7 people, and then I had already laid the foundation that by 2020 we had 80 people registered for Run
Wow.
for Zion. But 10 days before, because of
Yeah.
COVID, Ben Gurion Airport shut down, no tourists were allowed, and for 3 years, the idea of Run for Zion was scrapped. But what is coming back up, it won't be in 24, but God willing, 25, and we'll bring lots of people. who are runners or just want to walk 10 kilometers on a
Right.
beautiful Friday through Jerusalem and participate with 40,000 other people. So that's happening. That's unique. And again, as I mentioned, it's something that people can't say, well, I can't afford, because we offer subsidies based on how much money is raised simply on the formula. And it is a formula. I will bless those who bless you. If you raise a certain amount of money, we're providing subsidies. And I love that model. It really is biblical. It works and allows for people to come and have a really meaningful experience, not just getting on and off of a tour bus. Again, the podcast, webinars, I do prayer events. We have one coming up in May that I'll talk to you offline about and hopefully have an opportunity to promote, but a global prayer and fasting for Israel, Jews and Christians together. That's not a way,
Yeah.
something not to monetize that. We need to
Right.
come together and pray. And most recently is the book that we published, Israel the Miracle, which was I can't take the credit. I worked it, but God gave me the download in October of 22. We were coming on the 75th anniversary of Israel's
Yes.
independence. So I contacted a publisher who I was in touch with on something else entirely. I said, hey, what do you think about the idea of doing a book of essays by 75 Christian leaders from around the world about why Israel is significant? And he thought it was a great idea, improved upon it immediately. And so what that was in October of 22. In August of 23, 9 months later, we went from conception to delivery of the electronic file to the printer. And 2 weeks before the war began, this past September, the books were printed. They were eventually put on a ship and sent to most of them to America, many to Israel. But this is a great way of celebrating Israel, but from a Christian perspective. And Jews and Christians need to realize that. And there are a bunch of other things that we've done, that we've planned. I'll just mention one other real important thing, especially because I'm here in Texas. Everyone knows Genesis 12:3, which is the verse from which we get our name. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who curse you. Many people are challenged to think of what's the conclusion of that same verse, which is the families of the world will be blessed through you. That's my obligation. That's my obligation as a Jew to be a blessing to the families of the world. So in 2022, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, that was it. When you were having here in America issues getting baby formula, we
Right.
didn't have that problem. I landed here in Texas with 3 70-pound bags filled with baby formula, 200 pounds of baby formula that I brought from Israel with Hebrew writing on it and delivered it to 2 churches here because I have 6 children. I have 3 grandchildren. I couldn't imagine a parent not being able to give their child baby formula. That's horrific to me. So that was just one of the ways that we also are fulfilling that verse. It's not just about Christians standing and supporting Israel. It's also about Jews reciprocating there as well. And we do that with Genesis 1, 2, 3. And there are other examples. My friends in Pakistan who we've been supporting. You remember the flooding there that took place a couple of years ago. I think I'm the only Jewish person in the world who raised money to support Christian ministries in Pakistan because they were being persecuted and left off the list for relief efforts, and we stepped up to help them. So that's kind of my heart in an extended elevator pitch.
Well, that's awesome. And then what's the ER campaign you guys got?
The what?
It's some kind of emergency campaign as
Oh,
well.
right. So on October 8th, I didn't know how bad things were, but I knew we needed to step up and do something. And we created an Israel Emergency Campaign. Also, very important language. It's a campaign. It's not a fund. It's not all about fundraising. We do prayers. We're connecting people. It's much more than just, hey, we need money for such and such. But we've been blessed to raise a good bit of money and disperse it to fund families who were evacuated from their communities north of the Gaza. We paid for almost a month, I think, of their hotel and meals and activities in Jerusalem for people from one particular community. We're still doing something very long term. It's a very important project for at-risk youth in Sderot. This week, schools went back to session in Sderot, the city along the Gaza border that was terribly devastated. Dozens of people killed and kidnapped there on October 7th. And the schools finally just went back into session, and we're funding a project for at-risk youth that needs to be heavily funded for a long period of time. We're funding projects relating to civilian security, so people in communities like mine can be prepared if, God forbid, something happens from our Palestinian Arab neighbors. We are funding social welfare projects for soldiers, which means I'll make, winter's pretty much over in Israel, but I'll make a huge pot of soup in my home with Christian friends coming to visit, and we put it in the front seat of the car and go out and ladle 100 or 200 portions of soup
Wow.
on cold nights. And the big one that got a lot of traction was we raised money from donations as little as $1 all over the world, mostly from Christians, to give out winter jackets to reservists, because when they were called up, like my son and my son-in-law, who were called up on October 7th, they didn't go with winter clothes. And the army didn't have 300,000 winter jackets in a storage room. So we gave out, just before I came to America, we gave out our 1,000th jacket to, interestingly enough, to a unit that's so secret, we weren't even allowed to take pictures of the back of their head. But
Wow.
they're so appreciated. And on my podcast that's coming out this week, I spoke with two of the rabbis in the IDF who were involved with that. And I would encourage everyone just to listen to the last, I don't know, 20 minutes, where they talk about how, as I give out the jackets, and I said, hey, you all need to know this is coming from Christian supporters all over the world. And you should envision it not just as a warm jacket, but as a warm hug coming from so many people. When you listen to the language of these two rabbis and how their soldiers received it, and how other rabbis in the IDF received it, rabbis who were not predisposed to do anything with Christians, it blew me away. And I thought, wow,
Wow.
yeah, we gave out jackets, but now we're building bridges. We're breaking down these barriers, and we're showing that there is this unconditional Christian support. There's more stuff that we've done and we will be doing. The war is far from over and may yet get much worse before it gets better. So I'm just grateful to all of the support, and literally from $1 on up, that's enabling us to be very tactical. I tell people that we pivot, we give the money and do projects as needed where we can make the biggest impact with the biggest integrity.
So I know a lot of Christians that are not concerned about the whole, being used as an ATM thing. They just want to help, but there's always that hesitation of they don't know.
Yeah.
There's 50 million places right now. So what are some of your recommendations? Is there anything from through Genesis 1, 2, 3, like Christians that want to support financially?
Of course. So anyone can go to our website, genesis123.co, and there's, of course, a link for our Israel emergency campaign. And while we're pivoting away from the winter jackets because it's March and we don't need winter jackets so much, but this week I was talking to Christian friends. Okay, what do we need? Especially soldiers are still hundreds of thousands of soldiers. I said, you know what? We need antifungal cream, because that's serious. I donated some to my son's unit, and he thought I was a little crazy. And then when he gave it out to his soldiers, he said, "No, that was actually very helpful." So I'm telling people that's a silly thing, but it's a meaningful thing. In the winter, we were doing socks and hand warmers. Now we need
Right.
to pivot to other things that we can give them. Soon enough, it's going to be very warm out, so we'll be doing cold drinks and watermelon for soldiers, or bring an ice cream truck to an improvised base, and just love on them. And that's just for soldiers. The civilian security things that that are needed will be needed for a very long time. The at-risk youth. Oh, we did something very. It's very emotional to think about. But we have hundreds of women who are now widows, whose husbands have been killed, leaving behind thousands of children who are orphans, don't have a father anymore. And we are launching something. We did this first about a month ago with a group of wives of my son's paratrooper unit, where we bought 100 bouquets of flowers to thank them, to make them feel appreciated, because every woman, whether they forget if they lost somebody, but every woman whose husband was called up on October 4th and was either just discharged or still in the army, she's maintaining the home. She's keeping track of the kids. She's worrying. She's trying to keep whatever work or family business going. And we need to show appreciation for them as well. And so we're going to be especially focusing on widows, recent widows, to give them flowers, to show them support, to show them love, that people care. No one can replace their husbands, and we're not going to try and do that. But they need some comfort, and so anyone who gives just can know that, again, greatest impact with the highest integrity. But we pivot. I'm not going to tell people that we're going to do this next week, because I'm going to be
Right.
following what the needs are, and that we can actually deliver. That's important.
Definitely. And the needs change, and I think that's
Yeah,
probably, a very important thing, is that you can pivot and not get locked into one thing. Another thing I like to ask my English speaking Jewish friends is about where do you suggest that we go for accurate news on this war?
excellent question. CBN Jerusalem CBN in general puts out great stuff from a biblical perspective. All Israel News is also very good. My go-to sources are Jerusalem Post, which I find more diverse. Some of their writing I don't like, some of the editorials I don't like, but I need to be exposed to it all. Times of Israel is a little bit more has a little bit more of an editorial bias, which I don't care for, but it's generally reliable news. And then
Nice.
there's a site that's less popular, but I think more authentic in terms of providing a conservative approach, which is called Yisrael Hayom, Israel Today. I forget what the site is, but they're primarily a Hebrew site, but they do have English materials
Nice.
as well.
Nice. Yeah, I've been listening to all those. I think it's CBN if I remember right. They have Yar Pinto. He reports a lot. He's a Christian guy in the IDF, and
Ah,
he's
okay.
yeah. So that's unique perspective. Um, and then I've been listening to a lot of I think it's Jewish News Syndicate with Carolyn
Oh,
Glick.
JNS is also very
Yeah,
good. Yeah, I neglected that.
yeah. So that's good because that's really big for us. I cannot turn on the news in America when it comes to Israel and not get angry at the biasness, at the rhetoric, at the lies, at the narrative. If I flip everything they say that Israel's doing and just take out Israel and put Hamas, then I could listen to it. But other than that, but the sad thing is that's what Americans are listening to.
Yeah, correct. Correct.
So it is an issue. Truth. Truth has got to prevail. All right, as we're wrapping up, I was on your website earlier today, just before we got on, and I saw that there's a little blurb on there about the red heifer.
Oh
And so
yeah.
I've been following the story because I think this is big news. Um, so, from my understanding, some very esteemed rabbis from Israel went to Texas, and these Texas ranchers had been working for years to breed these red heifers without blemish, whom the yoke's never been on, following the commands. And these rabbis kind of signed off on them, and they got them to Israel. And they're in hiding, although I have seen it's reported in what city they were in. And I heard that they're planning a sacrifice this Pesach, this Passover. They they bought. I mean, it's out in the open. It's on the internet. They've got a plot of land that's in direct view of the Eastern Gate, and they're going to do this, and they're going to get the ashes, the red heifer. And then I saw Hamas do this, and they said in one of their Hamas spokesmen wrote that this is one of the reasons they attacked on October 7th.
That's interesting. I had not heard that latter part.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I definitely
So
didn't hear that. There's a lot of speculation. Hamas, I don't rely a whole lot on what they say, other than if they say we're going to kill you, they mean it.
yes,
But then they deny it. I don't know if that was a reason why, but yeah, I was present the day that the five red heifers arrived in Israel. Just been invited to attend at the airport. I tell people that I was overwhelmed at how overwhelmed I was. I thought it would be cool, but it was really something that was stunning. And I'm not a prophetic guy that's looking to connect dots, even if they're dots in different spheres, and say, oh, this happened, and therefore this is going to happen. So what I do know, and I'm not aware of anyone. I don't think the correct language is sacrificing, but because a sacrifice implies a temple
okay, I got
offering,
you.
but to slaughter and then burn the animal so you have the ashes. And what I tell people is the significance is you've got a big piece in place. It's like
Right.
we can kind of envision what the puzzle looks like. We don't have a picture. And now we have this one very, very important thing that's not around the edges, which is easy to assemble in a puzzle. You have a red heifer, presumably if they're all still pure and the color of the hairs haven't changed. And that isn't necessarily, from my perspective, expediting the reconstruction of the temple or anything else that we're waiting for. It's just a piece that's a necessary element for the resumption of temple service and the purification of those who are involved. So it's very significant. And yes, those cows have been protected super well. Um, I think it's fascinating. I think it's simply fascinating, and that Jews and Christians are united on this and looking to. I don't know that anyone's looking to come and put a shovel in the ground to build a temple tomorrow, but I just think it's one of the key foundational pieces that's necessary for us to get back to what we aspire for, which is the third and final temple.
For sure. And I can't speak for anybody else but myself, but I'm down to put a shovel in the ground. I'm down to respectfully disassemble the Dome of the Rock and the mosque and package that up and send that wherever they want to rebuild that. I will go help with
You want
that.
an
I'll get
IKEA Dome
like
of the Rock set?
yeah. I'm down. I'm ready. I'll go now to help disassemble. They probably won't let me. And then yeah, I'm ready to put a shovel in there. I knew I was gonna be angry on my first trip to Israel. The first thing we did was go to Temple Mount. I already knew I was
Wow.
gonna be mad when I saw those things on the Temple Mount. As a Christian, I just knew that those don't belong and they shouldn't be there. And I knew it was gonna make me angry. But what reminded me something, quick story before we close. You had mentioned you were overwhelmed about how overwhelmed you were when you
Yeah.
saw the 5 Rev heifers. I had that experience in Hebron
Okay.
when we went to the tomb of the patriarchs. I was expecting the Sea of Galilee that, Jesus walked on water, the Jordan River where he was baptized, the Temple Mount. I was expecting those to be some of the big moments for me, just to like be like, wow, Bible's real. Like this is a real place. Touch that water. Wow, I touched that water. I was expecting that in my mind. So I was overwhelmed how overwhelmed I was when we got to Hebron. The gravity, I don't know how to explain it, but it was like gravity, it was like weight, just like, man, just walking up to the tomb of the patriarchs. It was just like, I don't know. It's just so powerful. It was just, I was like, in my mind, I was like, wow, what's happening? This palpable feeling inside me of the gravity of this place. And then I did not expect this because I didn't know it. Then I was even more angry when I realized the Jews didn't have access to the whole building and
Wow.
certain times. I was like, what? This is it'd be like if my great grandfather was buried on a plot over there, and I got somebody else telling me I can't go there, or I can only go in certain times, or I can only go to
Good
half of
point.
it.
Good point.
I was just I was like, what? I was like, what? I just couldn't just like didn't register to me. And so I'm praying for Israel to reconquer all the land that have all the borders that God wants it to. I'm praying that Israel's IDF is successful against all their enemies. I'm praying that the Israeli government, you know, has the faith of like a King David to rule and I'm praying for a lot of things. And to me, it's easy for me to say because I'm not there and I don't have to deal with the war. But to me, the fear of doing something to provoke the Arabs or the Muslims, but I'm like, they're already trying to kill you, like literally, like they're already like surrounded you with missiles.
Correct.
So how could you get any worse? Let's go. But again, I'm not the one that has to deal with the rockets, but man, I'm just hoping that there's faith that they just get to where God has intended them to get 100%.
God willing. I
Yeah,
appreciate the prayers. It's important, and it's a great way because those things that you mention and others, just by being aware of it, Aaron, is an important way of connecting. And I'm grateful for you and your leadership and helping others to understand that.
Yeah, and I appreciate you and Genesis 123 Foundation and everything you're doing. And everybody needs to get Israel the Miracle book. And where could they get that book at?
The book is at israelthemiracle.com, and I would love to offer for your followers, anyone who's listening or watching, to go in when you check out, use the coupon code Jonathan10 to save 10% as my
Awesome.
gift. The publisher doesn't like it when I do that, but for me, we'll make a little bit of money, and we're committed to the money going back into projects that are funding the Israel Emergency Campaign. So that's nice and that's fine. But for me, the biggest priority is just getting this in people's homes. It's been
For
so
sure.
well received, and I that's for me. So if I can offer someone a 10% discount, that's really my privilege. IsraelTheMiracle.com.
So for folks out there that want to follow you, obviously you got the website, Genesis 123 Foundation, and then the Inspiration from Zion podcast, which I love. I listen to. I just listened to the episode with Elliot showed off. I always like
Yes,
listening to him. I always learn so much from him, and I just get
yes.
details from him I don't get from anywhere else. So, besides the podcast, the books, the website, is there anything else on socials where people can follow you or anything like that?
Well, I'm personally and Genesis 123 are on all social media, so you can follow. Unfortunately, I don't have enough friends available on Facebook to accept friends right now, but follow me there personally, Genesis 123, and just be in touch. And another way, this is not a solicitation for donors, but just I do send out special emails to donors, and so go online today at genesis123.co, donate $1, you get on our database, and then you'll start to receive those emails and updates and invitations from me that way too.
I just found you on X on Twitter as well. So
I am there. I don't like to call it X. That's a stupid name. I'm waiting for
yeah,
them to go back to. It's like the inventor of New Coke, whoever's idea that was. I don't know.
so I'm following you there now. So that's good. All right. Well, again, thank you so much, and thank you for all that you're doing. And may God bless your work.
Amen. Thank you, Aaron. You too.
All right, for everybody else listening out there, as always, until next time, stay safe.